Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm Tracy Sinclair. On Tuesday, after the president spoke with the House and the Senate, we spoke with Governor Mike Dunleavy to get his impressions of the president's speech. Here is that conversation with John Thompson.
Thank you very much. And Governor, thanks for taking a few minutes. What's your initial reaction to tonight's address to Congress?
Well, I mean, obviously, being the governor of Alaska, I was focused on what he was saying about Alaska, and we were the only state that I could hear that, and the only gas line project that was given the recognition and a shout out by the president, and so along with critical minerals. So it shows me that we were the only state that got an executive order, and he's always said to me that Alaska is important to the solutions for the country's issues, and so I was thrilled to death, especially on that part of the speech. And we are the Arctic sovereign, obviously, but also I always say the Western and Northern Pacific sovereign. So our neighbors in East Asia, we get this pipeline down here. Hopefully, the next couple of years are going to be beneficiaries of decades and decades and decades of gas, but also gas that comes from America in a increasingly more dangerous world. So I was very happy with the president's shout-out for Alaska. And, I also think a lot of what the president is trying to do is to kind of realign things, reorganize things here in the country, here in the world, to be honest with you. And part of that, for example, is I think he's looking at the $33 trillion debt and probably told himself, if we don't do something about it on my watch, meaning President Trump's watch, it's never going to get done. Because there's been plenty of times. I think the last time we had a deficit-free, debt-free, I should say, situation was under Clinton in '92 or somewhere around then. But nonetheless, I think there's going to be some tough decisions made, nationally and internationally, and I think there's going to be some reorganization, and I think he's going to focus on things such as wealth creation within the United States, and that includes resources.
So it's a pretty exciting time, and especially, like you said, the president's talking about Alaska. He's talking about getting things going up here in terms of the LNG, which has been years and years. And I know your staff and Senator Sullivan's staff has been working really hard with the president's staff to kind of get this going and to put it in front of him the way that it has been. In terms of the pushback, are you concerned? Are you cautiously optimistic about the timeline here? You were saying in the next couple of years, but is that realistic? Do you think?
I think it is. Under maybe different times and different circumstances, it may not have been, quote, realistic, but there's a couple things at play, right? We absolutely need the gas in Alaska, obviously. We've been fortunate that in south central Alaska, we've had a mild winter. Last winter, with 2 bouts of 20, 30 below zero, we were having some, concerns about drawing gas out of some of the storage in Cook Inlet. And, we've got to turn our lights on. The military's got to operate, et cetera. So the Trump administration knows this. They also know that in a world of supercomputers and AI and electrification of a lot of things, a lot of technology, you're going to need more energy. And you have to have a baseline fuel. It can't just be solar and wind because it's intermittent. It's not reliable. You can't run supercomputers 24/7, 365 just on wind and solar. Wind and solar can, help, but in Alaska, we need a baseline fuel. Gas is really our mainstay. We have lots of it. And our Asian allies, I think, are also rethinking. When the Philippines a week or two ago posted that they would, like to buy Alaska gas, the Taiwanese have also said, the same thing. I think you're going to see some partnerships formed in Korea here shortly with folks doing the natural gas project here in Alaska, and I think you're going to see the Japanese step in as well, along with other investors. And so, the future prospect for gas is growing, and our gas is not tied to any hub like Henry Hub. So we can do long-term contracts that are going to offer a lot of stability, especially for our Asian customers. And the Alaska residents are going to be the beneficiaries of this gas because the more gas that is going through the pipe and exported, the lower the cost will be here in Alaska for the mid and long term. And so I think there's a lot of great things that will come out of this. We could restart our fertilizer plant down in Nikiski. As I mentioned, AI, supercomputing. I think we could bring industry here to Alaska that hasn't had industry. And so I think it's all great news.
Well, yes, no, I agree. But after Trump had talked about the LNG a little bit, he had mentioned, and I think you mentioned it, the critical minerals and rare earths in the U.S., and he wants to get that going.
Yeah.
Do you know, does that have anything to do with Alaska? Is he talking about Alaska there as well?
Yeah, because if you look at the executive order, then this is important. We are the only state, and we are on his radar screen. We're the only state that received an executive order. Texas didn't, Florida didn't, and they're all great states, but Alaska did from the President of the United States. And in there, he detailed a lot of what Alaska has to offer. So critical minerals, oil and gas, definitely, and now with Brooke Rollins in as the Secretary of Agriculture, forestry is under agriculture, which means the Tongass and Chugach National Forests. Tremendous amount of opportunity there for trees, which we could turn into lumber for Alaskans and for export. Biofuels, biomass, also mining in those national forests. People seem to forget. We lost, I'm going to be honest with you, we lost our way over the last couple decades in that there became a narrative that any type of resource development in the United States, especially Alaska, would be absolutely 100% destructive to the environment and would be so harmful as to not even contemplate. And this is why, you don't see a lot of activity happening up here, or at least as much activity as could be. People also forget that Alaska is the only state in the country, the history of this country, that was compelled to collectivize its resources before we became a state under the Statehood Act in 1959 in order for us to be allowed into the Union. We were not going to be allowed into the Union unless we agreed to collectivize those resources and develop them. And the irony of that whole thing is we've been prevented from developing our resources by the very federal government agencies, the federal government and its agencies, that said if you're going to come in under Eisenhower, you better develop your resources. It's a bizarre twist of fate that has befallen Alaska. And so I think what you see, some people are, their hair is on fire because President Trump wants to create new jobs, create new wealth, get investment in America, produce gas, produce oil. This is all what the world needs and wants. And one more important thing I think is very, very critical. If you're going to develop resources such as I described, timber, logging, critical minerals, mining, oil, gas, drilling, you want to do it in this country because if you do it overseas, they don't have the environmental protections that we have. They don't have regulations and laws against child labor or persecution of minorities. We don't prop up dictators here in America. We're a Republican form of government. We're a democracy. Over there they do. So there is really no good reason to ship our industries, especially our resource development, over there. And I'm glad the president is reorganizing things.
Very good. I guess my last question before we let you go, just a quick one on Doge. The president spent a lot of time on that during tonight's speech. Where do you stand on the cuts that you've seen so far and what we heard from the president tonight?
Look, here's the situation. As I mentioned earlier, the president has inherited $33 trillion in debt. The president has inherited a situation where we are spending money, not just in this country, but worldwide, on things that most people would think don't make sense. I don't think there's anyone also that would say that there isn't probably fraud that needs to be dealt with. So with that said, reorganizing what was decades in the making is going to be painful. And I don't say that nonchalantly. I don't say that without realizing that there are going to be good people who lose their jobs in this process. But here's the problem. If you don't tackle a $33 trillion debt now, when do you do it? You already have a situation in this country where you have young adults that can't afford a house, they're living with their parents, they can't afford a car, they are barely making ends meet. We just went through a whole episode of loan forgiveness by the Biden administration for those that went to college. So no matter when this happens, it should have happened a long time ago, but the sooner it happens, the long-term health of the country is we're going to be in better shape. And so, yeah, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. I put out a video saying to folks that may be laid off by the federal government in Alaska that we have openings in the state government. A lot of those skills, a lot of the experiences they had could transfer into our state government. And so I think there's opportunities for folks that are losing their jobs, but at the same time, something has to be done to rein in the debt for our grandkids. I don't see how we have a country if we keep piling on the debt like we've been piling on.
Thank you to Governor Mike Dunleavy for speaking with us, and thank you for listening to In Depth Alaska. Please like and follow this podcast.